Hello there, it's Juliana Michaels and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm sharing two of the cards I created using some of the new Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous 2024 Halloween stamps and stencils and that Tim featured during his YouTube Live. Get ready to pull out those alcohol inks, distress paste, and stencils and follow along with this 2-for-1 technique. And even if you aren't into Halloween, you can still use these techniques with any stencils and make it your own. I encourage you to use supplies that you already own. However, if you are interested in any of the products I'm using, you can find the supply list with links in the description box below. Just click on the word more to see more. When you shop through those links, you're supporting me at no extra cost to you, and I appreciate that so very much. For this card, I'm going to be working with some of the stamps and stencils from the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous Halloween 2024 release. And the stencils I'm going to be using is Batty and Bones. And then the stamp sets I'm going to be using are the Boo Crazy and the Spooky Spirits stamp sets. And if you're wondering about this, I just clipped that extra little small ghost onto the other one with a little clip just because I kept losing the backing. So just a little tip for you. So for this card, I'm going to be working with alcohol ink and Smudge, Gravel, and Pitch Black. And I'm going to be using 91% isopropyl alcohol. You could also use blending solution. This is just a little less expensive. The inks I'm going to be working with are Archival ink and black soot. So you just need some sort of black permanent ink for this part. And then I'm also going to be using alcohol lift ink. And if you don't have alcohol lift ink and you have hickory smoke archival ink, you could substitute that for the alcohol lift ink. But just that color, for some reason it works as a substitute for this. And I shared about that in a recent video where I was sharing some alcohol ink techniques when the new colors came out for the alcohol inks. The other ink I've got is some Distress Oxide and Black Soot in Uncharted Mariner. And we'll also be using some black texture paste. And then the tools I've got here are blending brush, another blending foam that you're going to use with the alcohol lift ink. So you just want to make sure it's not one that you're using with your other inks. Blower, and then a bone folder or some sort of like maybe even a stylus. Some sort of tool that you can use for rubbing. And then the papers I'm going to be using are Yupo paper and then just some Distress White Heavystock. And I'm going to be working on my glass mat when I use the alcohol inks just because it's a little easier to clean up from this surface. So I like to just kind of get my colors all set out and ready to go here. Get the lids off. And then, you can either put the alcohol down first or you can add the ink first. I don't know that it super matters. Everybody kind of has their own little preferences with that sort of thing. And then I'm just kind of plopping down different colors here. Get them across the paper. Now we're going to start adding some of the rubbing alcohol. And you usually need more alcohol than you think you do to get everything moving. And with the blower tool here, you just want to go with like nice, kind of small little puffs with it. You don't need to squeeze like you're trying to do CPR or anything. I do occasionally seem to push really hard, and then you'll get these little fine little, like that. So I'm almost kind of going too hard there, so just small little puffs. Add a little more alcohol there. Okay, so I'm kind of starting to like how this is looking. This is always the tough part for me with like doing alcohol ink backgrounds is like, am I happy with how it looks? Do I want more color? And then, you know, because once you add more color, another ink, then you're going to start getting, you know, it's going to change what's there because they will just continue to react with each other as they go. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And maybe a little more of the gravel here. Look, I keep kind of getting this cool like blue thing there happening when I add some of the, when I add the rubbing alcohol to where I put the pitch black. Not sure what's going on there, but kind of cool. But yeah, just a little more up here. Yeah, I think I'm gonna let that be, and then I'm just gonna set this to the side and let it finish drying. And then as far as like the cleanup goes, you can just use your rubbing alcohol to clean off your craft mat, or you can also use hand sanitizer. So yeah, so there is a look at our inky background. All right, so now we're going to work with the alcohol lift ink. So just need to get a few of our little tools here together. So you need your blending tool and the alcohol lift ink and your rubbing tool, and then you also need a paper towel. And then I recommend some sort of sticky mat or something to help kind of hold your paper in place so that it doesn't slide around. You could also use some kind of temporary tape to hold it down. This just happens to be the Altenew sticky grid mat, and I'm working on the side that's less sticky because I don't need super strength right now. I just need to have a little something to help hold this down. And then I'm just going to center my stencil over my paper. And just press that down. And then we're going to use the blending tool to apply the ink through the stencil. So you're going to want to kind of press pretty hard, get that ink down into that stencil really well. I like to kind of go over each section multiple times just to make sure I really got a good amount of ink in there. lift off that stencil. And we're going to place that other piece of paper, that Distress White Heavystock, on top of this. So you can just kind of, actually, let's try this the other way. So I'm going to pick this up, put that paper down, and then I can position this. And then I'm going to rub over this with my hand. You could also use like one of those little like stamp tools. You could also use a brayer. Kind of rub over it with that if you like. Oh yeah, that worked really well. Yeah, that looks awesome. Another thing you can do is also take your bone folder and rub over, but you're going to need to be really careful that your paper doesn't move while you're rubbing over it like that. See, like it slid a little bit on me there. I think I like it better without that, but it still looks pretty cool. So yeah, so there we are. So now we're gonna peel this all up, and we're gonna take that paper towel that we had, and we're gonna place that on top of the alcohol lift background and rub over it with the bone folder. Like I said, you can also use like a stylus if you want, rub over it. I just find that that helps get that alcohol ink up. So like it removes it and really reveals that design under there. I've seen people rub over it with their cloth, and I don't know, I always find that it smears the ink. So but I kind of prefer the bone folder, just kind of a larger surface area. And then once you kind of get some ink up, then you can kind of move the towel around to a clean area and go back and then do the next section. All right, so there is a look at our 2-for-1 alcohol ink background so far. So now we're just going to move on to the next step. And then as far as cleaning your stencil, you can just use some rubbing alcohol to clean that off as well if you like. So now the next step I want to do for this background is I'm going to add a little stamping to that. So I'm going to position it here in my stamp platform, and I just have a little bit of a temporary adhesive, just a dotted, it's just a dotted tape runner from scrapbook.com, and I would just kind of use that to help hold the paper in place here. And then we're going to use this big spider web from the Boo Crazy stamp set, and I'll kind of position it in here so it kind of stamps across the background there. And then we're just going to ink that up with some black soot archival ink. And yeah, so there we go. Yeah, I mean, I know it kind of covers up what we did with the alcohol ink, but I'm just building layers, and I'm always okay with that. Like, just, you know, if you don't want to like do the stamping part, skip it. Totally skip it, okay? Definitely options. So now we are gonna do, so now I'm gonna add some texture paste to these panels. And obviously with the regular paper, you're maybe familiar with using paste on that, so it's really no big deal. The technique's going to be the same on both of these papers, but I did not know that you could do texture paste on Yupo paper, and it worked. So I was pretty excited about that when I tried it and it worked. So I'm just going to use a little bit of mint tape to kind of block off or mask off part of the stencil here, because I don't want to get the paste into that area there. I just want to keep it kind of in the center of my paper here. Now if you can't see, like I can't see if I've got it centered or not, kind of get that centered and then add the tape. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I'm working on that same sticky mat that I did earlier. This time I'm just kind of, I have the more sticky side facing up. And got some press and seal in my paste here to just try to help keep it from drying out so quickly. And you're just gonna scoop that up onto the back side of the palette knife and then just gently press it into the stencil and then kind of wipe at it, like add a little bit of an angle to spread it across the stencil. And you're just lightly rubbing it across the stencil. You're not pushing the paste into the stencil, you're just rubbing it over the stencil. And as you can see there, that's quite a lot of paste there. That's actually too much. If you can't see the stencil design, you've got too much on there. So then I kind of like to I'll go at a little bit more of a upward angle and get more of the edge of the knife on there, and then rub over some of those areas, get some of that excess off. And then I can also kind of make sure I've got all the areas filled in that I want filled in if I'm looking for kind of more of a solid coverage. And there we go. So and we'll just gently peel off the stencil. Set that to the side. And then if you're using a sticky mat, you can kind of lift it up this way and then peel it off of your paper. And then you're just going to set that to the side and let that dry. And then we're going to repeat that same process on this other background paper. Just kind of checking my stencil to make sure there's not a bunch of paste kind of gone through and underneath the stencil. So like if you notice that there is, then you might want to clean your stencil before you do this, and so that you don't get it where you don't get paste where you don't want it. So again, I'm going to kind of peel this up here a little bit just to kind of make sure I'm getting this centered like I want it. I'm going to put that tape back on there and mask off that area again. And then we're just going to get some more paste and apply that through the stencil. And you might notice, like, I'm also using my fingers to kind of help hold this down. If you want, you could also put some more of that tape on there in those sections as well. And then when you're all finished with the paste, you just want to make sure if you're using the press and seal to kind of push that back down in there and get it all the way down into the paste so you get some of that air out of there. And then you also want to clean your stencil and your palette knife right away. So either get this into a tray with some water or, you know, go to the sink and wash it. And then, yeah, then just set this one to the side and let it dry as well. And we'll move on to the next step. All right, so to add a little more interest to the background of this card, I'm going to add a little bit of some inking with some Uncharted Mariner and Distress Oxide, and just kind of ink around the edges here a little bit. I'm just kind of rubbing that ink onto the craft mat and then using the brush as I go in this circular motion to kind of pull that ink up onto the paper. And now I'm just going to take a foam blending tool and just rub that along the edges of the paper here, just to give it that a little bit of a little bit darker edge, but not too, like, not covering up so much of the Uncharted Mariner that we just put on there. And of course I do that and I'm like, I think I might want to mat this onto something. So if you want to mat this onto something, you know, you can trim it out now or later and then, you know, add another layer onto it. So if you do that, then you'll just need to kind of re-ink those edges a little bit. And then for this background, I'm going to add just a few little splatters with some rubbing alcohol. So I'm just going to put a little dab of that onto my craft mat here and use a brush. I'm just going to tap that onto the background just to add a little interest. There we go. And then one last touch I want to do on this background is I'm going to add some little splatters with some water. So I'm just going to tap this here and there across the background. You can also spray, but because I didn't really use watercolor cardstock, I'm trying to go kind of light with the amount of water I use here so that it doesn't, so that it can handle it. And yeah, so there's a look at the two backgrounds we created using the alcohol inks. And then I will just finish these off by adding some sentiments and matting them onto another layer of cardstock. Here's a look at the finished cards. For this one, I die cut the word boo from gold craft stock using the Vault Gothic Portraits die set, and then a second time from regular craft stock. I sanded the gold craft stock with a Ranger sanding disc to give it a distressed effect, and then glued those layers together to make it a little more sturdy. The other part of the sentiment is stamped using the Spooky Spirits stamp set onto black craft stock and heat embossed with gold embossing powder. I then trimmed around it, sanded the edges with a sanding disc, and adhered it with some double-sided foam adhesive for a little dimension. For the second card, I stamped a sentiment from the Boo Crazy stamp set onto black craft stock and heat embossed it with gold embossing powder. I then trimmed around it, sanded the edges with a sanding disc, and adhered it with some double-sided foam adhesive for a little dimension. I also added a couple of Ideology screw heads that I distressed with gravel alcohol ink before adhering them to the strip. I hope you enjoyed seeing how these cards came together using the new Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous 2024 Halloween Stamps and Stencils. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can join me on a more regular basis. Hit the like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to join me on my other social media platforms, you can find the links to those in the description box below. Also, feel free to leave me a comment if you have any questions or if there's something you'd love to share with me and our community. I'll see you in the comments below and in the next video. Until next time, stay crafty, my friend.